Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your guide to the Whitetail Woods. Presented by First Light, creating proven, versatile hunting apparel for the stand, saddle, or blind. First Light, go further, stay longer. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this week on the show, I'm joined by diehard DIY bow hunter Justin Hollandsworth. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by First Light. We are back with another entry in our Big Buck Breakdown series that we're doing this month here in January 2023. It's 2023 now, folks. That's crazy. We're chatting with hunters this month about long, challenging, interesting, obsession-worthy hunts for single specific bucks. That's what I wanted to find this month, were these epic sagas of a single-minded deer hunter chasing down a single deer and all the ups and downs that can go with that. Now, last week we talked to Tyler Utter about a 6-year hunt that was definitely full of curveballs. Today we've got a 4-year hunt, a 4-year journey for Justin Hollandsworth. And if you're not familiar with Justin, he films with the Whitetail Addictions crew. He is a deadly serious bow hunter. He's hunted all over the Midwest, chasing whitetails from his home state of Ohio to Illinois, Iowa, all over the place, all these different whitetail states, and he just gets it done. He's kind of followed in the footsteps of that Andre DeQuisto kind of lineage, and he's very mobile, quick thinking, aggressive, but a smart, thoughtful hunter, and he's proven it year after year after year with a whole lot of really nice deer on the ground in a wide variety of settings. So lots we can learn from Justin, and he does a very good job of kind of sharing what he does and why he does it, which I've really enjoyed in all of our past conversation. And Justin is someone who we have talked to before on the podcast. This was probably 2 years ago. We had a great conversation with him, kind of going through his whole style of deer hunting, how he approaches the season, what his general bow hunting philosophy is. So definitely go back and listen to that one. And that first episode with him was episode 357. And that one's titled Getting Out of Your Deer Hunting Comfort Zone. And that was a great conversation, like I mentioned. So highly recommend going back and listening to that to kind of lay the groundwork. And then with this one, we are going to get the blow-by-blow breakdown of how this hunt went, how he discovered this deer, everything he did to follow along with it over the years, and ultimately the crazy things that happened along the way as he tried to kind of close the deal, get a shot at him with his bow. He's a special buck, giant deer, old deer. We cover everything from, I think a big thing with him is how he goes about getting access to new properties and how he tries to gain new access around where a buck lives that he's after. That's a big thing we cover. We talk a lot about trail cameras and scouting and glassing, and what I think will stand out to you when you listen to this story is how much scouting goes into what he does. It's not as much the hunting as it is glassing, watching pictures, getting new access, driving around. There's a lot of that within this story. And I think that's something to keep in mind as we go through this as well. And then also, we get to see Justin go through some really low lows in this hunt. Some stuff happens that I think would send a lot of people into a funk. Some stuff happens that would definitely bring you way down when you're chasing a buck like this and you have that happen. And Justin was able to push through it. So this is a story of kind of battling through some adversity, staying, persevering through it and trying to find that positive window and keep it on going. So we're going to cover that as well. So we're going to learn a lot about how he approaches these hunts from a strategy perspective, and then also how he kind of as a person pushed through and kept on going after this deer and ultimately was able to get an arrow in him and a great story to tell and a hell of a memory. So that's the game plan today. This is a long episode, as you can see. But, it's funny. It doesn't feel long. At least it didn't feel long to me as we went through this conversation. It moved along quickly because there's just so many interesting things that happened in this story. And then we get into some very, I thought, worthwhile kind of rabbit holes along the way as we kind of sunk our teeth into a specific decision he made or a specific setup or a thing that happened along the way. We kind of try to explore the whys behind each one of his decisions and how he got to where he got. So that's what we have in store. Hope you guys enjoy this one. I hope this series is a nice change of pace. We don't usually do these story-focused podcasts really ever, but I thought it would be a nice way to kick off the year, kind of revel in some success stories and try to learn from these specific hunts and these experiences that other people have to hopefully set us up on a great path heading into our own 2023 seasons. So let's get into this episode with Justin. I know you're going to enjoy it. Thanks for being here. Here we go. All right, with me back on the show is Justin Hollandsworth. Justin, welcome back, man. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad. I'm glad you can make it.
Always a good time to catch up and chat with you.
I know. I was thinking the last time we did a podcast together, I was sitting in my pickup truck. I was recording the podcast from my pickup truck. It was like 97 degrees out in the summer. I didn't want to have the AC on in the truck because I didn't want like that noise to distort the audio. So I was just like sweating bullets and miserable. And now it's the opposite. It's like freezing cold here in Michigan. I'm in my office, but my podcast editor always complains about my heat kicking on and off in the office and messing up that audio. So now I'm wearing a winter jacket to try to stay warm in my freezing cold office with the heat turned off. So it's perpetual climate issues when I'm talking to you, Justin.
That's funny. I didn't know that about the last one. It was I didn't know you were sitting at blazing hot.
Yeah, it was in the summer when I was at my cabin, and I have no good quiet place to record inside the house. So I always have to go like in the truck, or when we have our camper opened up, I'll do that. And on that particular day, it was a truck day. So yeah, this is a little better, but just cold. But more importantly, today we're talking about your hunt. We're doing a series this month all about, diving deep, peeling back the layers on really special hunts for special bucks and trying to get inside the minds of folks that chase a deer like that obsessively. And it sounds like that would accurately describe your hunt for the deer you called Woody. Would you agree?
Yep, for sure. Without a doubt.
If you could, to kick this off, I'm wondering if you can just paint a picture for us of this deer so that as we go through this story, as we talk about this deer, as we talk about your hunt and the years-long journey, we've got like something in our mind's eye. Can you describe anything about him as far as his age, his size, his body, his antlers, his anything that makes him unique? Like, what's the picture you want in our heads as we go through this story?
So if I could picture or describe Woody, he is I had 4 years of pictures of the deer, so I was thinking he was a 6.5-year-old buck. He's either 5.5 or 6.5 is what I think. Big, dark, cherry forehead, big chocolate rack with not a huge framed deer, but really heavy, with split brow tines on both sides, a split G2 on one side. He is a 5x6 with a big inner point as well. So he had a total of 16 points.
Whew.
Just a brood of a deer, a big bodied deer, but not. I've killed bigger bodied deer. Some older bucks are just bigger bodied than others, and he wasn't that 280, 300 kind of brute kind of deer. He's probably 220 or so, I would guess.
Yeah. No slouch.
No. And was a little bit of a roamer too, in the area.
Okay.
So especially, I don't know if you want to, start back at, the time, it was 2019. That's when I first started getting pictures of the deer.
Okay. So before we start with the story, and without giving away specifics of the story, I'm curious for this one additional thing to kind of lay the groundwork here. When you think about this deer, when you think about this hunt, and maybe if you were to fast forward 10 years, if you were 10 years older than you are and you're sitting in the lazy boy chair, drinking a cold one, sitting with some buddies, and you think back on this hunt and you think back on this deer, what do you think stands out to you as what makes this hunt and this deer so special? If you could kind of high level describe what it is about this hunt or this deer that you think makes this one or will make this one something that sticks with you for a long time. Is it just because of the length of time you hunted him? Is it because of the challenge or something like that? Again, you don't need to tell me the specifics of those stuff yet, but I'm curious just like what's the thing we should be paying attention to as we go through this story that made it so special for you?
I would probably say the fact that he disappeared for a season and I had no clue where he was, to reappear last season and without giving too much of it away yet. And then probably a lot of the things that were just out of my control at times. I would say that, like, there was just things that happen along the way that I wouldn't necessarily say that I did wrong. It was just unforeseen circumstances at times.
Okay. So like a lot of ups and downs that you kind of couldn't control that made this a roller coaster maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's get on the roller coaster then, I guess. 2019, you got your first pictures of him. It sounded like he was like a small-bodied, young-looking deer at that point. Is that right?
Yeah, he was. I thought the deer was, by looking at the pictures, he just looked like a 2.5-year-old to me. But he had a big frame, but it looked big on the deer of that, with a body that small. And he had 17 points as a 2.5, 3.5-year-old buck.
Good Lord, that's crazy.
So when you seen the deer, you look at those old trail cam pictures of him, you would just see anybody that's seen that deer as young as he was, you would just think that's going to be a 200-inch whitetail. And that's what I always thought in my mind. And it's funny too, because one thing that I always thought when I was looking at pictures of him throughout that summer, he always reminded me of Gene Wenzel killed a deer years ago back in Iowa that he named Woody. And I just randomly, not purposely, I just started calling this deer Woody in my head because that's what he reminded me of. Now, Gene had a different reason for naming the deer that he killed Woody. If you listen to any of Gene's old podcasts or interviews or anything like that, Gene said that he named that deer in Iowa Woody because every time he seen a deer, it gave him a Woody.
I like that. There you go. That's the kind of buck you want to chase.
Yeah, so it was always comical to me that he did that and said that, and but the deer just reminded me from the way that deer was built and everything. I just thought, boy, he could be like that deer someday.
So when you get a deer like that pops up on a place you hunt, what do you do? Because it's a young buck that it sounds like obviously you didn't want to hunt him, at that age. He's a deer that you had like high hopes for in the future. Do you do anything different in that kind of situation where you really badly want a buck to make it a year or two more? Do you stay out completely? Do you start putting more feelers out and just start taking extra care to pay attention to what he's doing from then on? Or do you just, go about your hunting like you usually would, chase whatever deer you're after, and this buck just is kind of on the back shelf and, keeping tabs from afar?
Probably a couple different things. A lot of times I'll try to, if I have an opportunity to, maybe to put some food in there, or maybe buy some crops or something like that. If I'm a farmer, I'll always try that route just to keep them, keep them around. Just try to, I like to just a lot of times put a lot of those trail cameras out and just leave them out for an entire season and just let them soak and not mess with them, and just, try to give them their space just so they'll stick around. And the problem when they're that young though is they're just squirrely and they just want to run all over the place, especially when late October through November hits. I mean, those 2 and 3 year old bucks could, my gosh, you could end up anywhere. And I just really just tried to keep the pressure off of them. I didn't have a deer back there that I wanted to kill, but I did have a deer back there that was an old bully buck that was kind of running the show back there for quite a while. And I actually had Troy Pottinger out that year to hunt during late season. And I told Troy about this deer, and we were trying to get on that old bully buck that was back there. And I was hoping we could get him out of there, because he had a lot of effect on that farm and kicking up other nice deer out of there. So that's about, and just keep your fingers crossed. Because I think as a 2.5, 3.5 year old buck, he was probably 145, 150 at that age. So, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter the deer's age. You get a deer, that good in front of most guys, and they're going to shoot that deer.
Yeah. So what ended up happening? Did Troy get that bully buck? Did you see or learn anything more about this deer? How'd that year end?
So that year, as the season went on, Troy, the deer was around here and there. It seemed like he kind of left out of there once he shed velvet that year, and that bully buck was kind of running the show back there. So I didn't get a lot of pictures of him, mostly just summertime pictures that year. And then Troy and I we could never get on that bully buck when he was out. Plus we ended up finding another buck and that he almost killed when he was out that year. So never to get that deer that year. So I was hoping I think I might have brought my son back there too, trying to get on that bully buck at one point. But after season went out, I walked a ton of miles that year looking for those sheds. I never found those sheds to Woody that year. And, but kind of just fast forwarded into the following summer, and I loaded the place up with cameras. Did a lot of driving around that summer, glassing in that area, looking for him. And I never got one picture or one sighting from glassing in the summer or hunting or anything in the 2020 season, not once.
How common is that, do you think, Justin, for you when it comes to these deer you've chased over the years, where you get them in an area and then they flat out disappear for a full season? And then we know that, I mean, kind of getting ahead of us ourselves a little bit, but he does come back. So how often does this kind of thing happen to you or to your buddies when you hear from folks? Is this kind of a common thing in your experience?
I would say 20% of the bucks kind of pull that Houdini act at some point. Some of them are homebodies. Some of them never leave, and they're always right there. And then others, they just some when they're younger, they might be kind of figuring out where they kind of want to settle in or where they can settle in because of other mature bucks in an area. I think that has to do a lot with it. And I think, and I've seen mature bucks shift to just other farms or other areas before, and deer that you never knew was around move in. I would say 20% of the time, that might happen.
It's only happened to me once where I've had a buck that I was really after completely disappear for a year and then show right back up. And the next year was like right back to normal. And I had always thought maybe it had to do with crop rotation because he was there the corn year. And then the next year, the whole farm was beans and he disappeared. And then the next year was corn again. And here he was feeling comfortable. Have you ever, is that something you ever think might have an impact? Just, in maybe like cover, places light on cover where standing corn is so important for cover. Maybe that's more impactful or anything like that.
Yep. Yeah. I just think too, like me personally, I would much rather have corn on a farm than beans. I think it just seems like the early season, it might not be as good because they're sometimes they like that cover or whatever, but a lot of times I just feel like that corn holds them later in the year. But there's times where there's just so many variables that can come in why I think a deer is, stays on a property or why he decides to leave. I mean, pressure, pressure is a huge thing. I don't think people put, enough, I see too many neighbors from the word go of season, just pound it and on every day. It doesn't matter what the wind's doing.
Yep. Speaking of like what holds, deer in certain properties or certain areas, can you describe what this area, or this property looks like? Like, what's the setup? What's the terrain we're dealing with here? What is this area that this deer was calling home?
So it's a lot of the area is a lot of small woodlots, a lot of wide open fields, and a lot of fence rows. There's a couple pretty good sections of timber around the area, but most of it is pretty open farmland, pretty flat. But you just had these, there's small pockets of just, good cover where that's only going to hold maybe one mature buck typically. And, I think too, sometimes that, that's kind of what made the situation, I would probably say more, definitely more favorable on his part because of so many times that a deer can bed in those small woodlots and it's just hard to get to them.
Yeah.
Because they see.
So in this situation, this buck had been on this area. He disappeared. Did you ever end up getting any kind of strong guess on why you think he left or where he went? Did you get an answer at any point to what was going on, or was it just, a mystery until the next year and you found him again?
It was just more of a mystery than anything. I know some of the other guys in the area too. Now, we don't always tell each other about, all the, the bucks that we're getting on camera. Me and one other good friend do. We tell each other, but yeah, I would say most of the other guys, we're not sharing a lot of that information. I mean, it's just, it is what it is. I mean, that's hunting, and,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't blame them if they were getting him on camera. But I think that, in the area, and that year, that 2020 season, when I couldn't find the deer, I spent a lot of time driving and trying to locate that deer in the bean fields and stuff like that. And even that year, I shot my buck here in Ohio that year in like the first week of season. So I was done and had a lot of time to get my truck even during November when I wasn't out of state hunting and try to locate the deer. But I could not locate him that year. I got an idea of where he was, but then again, later on, I kind of figured out through talking through a neighbor that he had never been getting pictures of him that season. So from what I thought and where he was and the guy that had permission on that piece, he was never there. So
when you're trying to relocate a buck like that, how wide a net are you casting? Like when you're driving around glassing in the summer or driving around in November, watching fields and all that different stuff, talking to neighbors, what's the range that you realistically are searching? Is it like, a mile square? Are you looking further than that? What's that, from your experience, been the possible range?
I would say I try to keep it within that 2 mile span. I feel like a lot of times in farmland, open, farm country, it seems like that you can usually locate them. But I've been wrong. I mean, there's been times I know me and a buddy were just talking about this. We know of a buck that I used to get pictures on a farm and he was getting pictures of the deer the year after that, and now the deer's like 5 or 6 miles away from here.
Jeez.
So I can't figure, I just think they all have their own personalities and they all have their, and just other, variable, just reasons why, they want to leave a property. Maybe it's, the hunting pressure there, or maybe it's, maybe they're a loner and the deer numbers are high there. They don't like that. I've seen that quite a few times with deer before, especially older class bucks, where they just don't want to be. I can say this, that I've had pieces before I've had permission on that I was able to put food plots and do a lot of work on them and thinking I was going to make the property better. And I made the property better from a deer's number standpoint, but from a matured buck standpoint, I didn't, because it seemed like the older class bucks, they weren't there as much as they used to be when the deer numbers were low. I don't know why. The only reason I can think of is just because they're loners and they don't like, I don't know. I think us as people, as we get older, sometimes we get like that, you know?
Yeah, it's the grumpy old man effect, right?
Yeah. I think that happens with a lot of deer, where they just want to be. Now, maybe they might show back up during, you know, November or something like that, because there might be a lot of does or something in there, or maybe late November when they're looking for that, you know, last doe or two or something like that. But I think sometimes high deer numbers can definitely be a contributing factor to maybe the caliber of animal that's on a property.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can definitely see how that could be the case. They don't seem to like that stress of other deer around all the time and competition for food and solitary bedding areas and all that kind of stuff. So in this case, though, he disappeared. You couldn't find him. How long do you keep the faith that that deer's even alive? Did you kind of give up on them that at some point that season, say, well, he probably got shot? Or were you thinking, man, all the way through that year and into the next, you were still holding out hope that, man, he could be back this year. He could be maybe 5. You know, were you still operating in 2021 as if he was going to show up, or had you moved on?
Well, late season of 2020, a good friend of mine sent me a picture of a deer that got killed probably like 3 or 4 miles from here, and it resembled him. He said, "Hey, I think this is that deer that you called Woody." And I looked at the deer, but it looked like a 5, 6, 7-year-old kind of buck to me in the pictures. A lot of the same characteristics and stuff like that of that deer. He really thought it was. I didn't so much. At points, I thought maybe it is him, and maybe that's what he turned into. And other times, I just thought that it wasn't. But I honestly kind of thought, you know, that ship had sailed going into 2021. I just thought, well, that deer's gone, kind of thing. And that's how I went into the season. I just kind of forgot about the deer and kind of went back to what I always do, and, you know, trying to locate, you know, the bucks I want to go after in the summer.
So fast forward us to where things changed again. So 2021 continues on. You've moved on to other deer. You've got, you killed some big flyer buck last year, right? Isn't that what I remember? Is that what happening? Yeah.
I killed a big non-typical with a bunch of, he's got all these flyers and junk coming off his bases and stuff.
Yeah.
So 2021. So I had a couple different bucks that I was interested in, and I think it was in July, one of my neighbors that used to hunt a farm right by, it texted me one evening and said, "Hey, I don't know if you heard, but we lost permission over there on our main farm." And I said, "Oh, you did?" And it was by, it was close to where I had killed Woody. And I said, "Oh, really?" And I said, I kind of figured that because it sold the property. There was an older lady that she passed away, and they sold the property, and then they had hunted it for years and years. And he said, "Well, I might as well let the cat out of the bag." And I said, "Oh yeah, about what?" And he said, "I'm gonna send you over some trail cam pictures." So he sent me over some trail cam pictures, and man, as soon as I looked at him, I'm like, "Man, is that Woody?" And the more I looked at him, and I was going back and looking at mine, and it's funny because then he asked me, he's like, "You know that buck?" And I'm like, "Nope, I don't know that buck." And he told me, he said, he was like, "You should try to get permission around there." But he said, "I heard people on the other side over there don't allow any hunting." And so I think it was like the next day after he sent those pictures to me, or day after that. I mean, I was over there. I think I knocked on 4 doors over there, and I got 2 no's because they had people hunting already. But then I got 2 yeses. And one of the yeses that I got was on a 25-acre piece that butted right up against the woods that they were getting pictures of him in. And he showed me, he dropped a pin and showed me this is exactly where my camera was in there, where I was getting pictures of him. And so I was only a couple 100 yards maybe from where he was getting pictures. And then here in Ohio, I mean, we can run bait. So in the summertime, I had bait out over camera over there, and I thought for sure I'd get pictures of him. I got pictures of a 10 that he was running with, but I never got pictures of him, which was weird.
Huh.
So I drove around a ton trying to figure out, because I thought maybe he might be squirting out the backside and heading west out of that place and maybe staying out onto some fence rows. So I was doing a lot of glassing out through there. Some of the spots I can't really get to, though, to see them because of the way some of the other properties come in there. And so I never did locate him in 2021 besides a neighbor sending me some pictures. And I was just hopeful that he was going to show up on, I had 3 different places I had permission on right there in that little area. So I was just hopeful that he'd show up on one of them.
What was the camera strategy across those 3 properties? Because you've got this buck you're really after. You're hoping he's going to pop up somewhere. Did you run the standard camera strategy that you always do, or did you have anything different in this kind of like search phase for him?
Well, the one thing I did do too, because I've noticed something the last few years that sometimes, not all bucks, but some of them get a little funny around some of these cell cams. So I wanted to make sure that what I was doing was not just the standard, cell cam over a bait pile or over a mineral site or whatever. I was trying to run some just standard cameras too, and just trying to keep them up out of line of sight and stuff like that, of where he might be, entering or exiting, one of those 3 properties that I had access to. And I was hoping that, because I've had some times where I've known of particular bucks on a farm, and if you didn't have a visual sighting, you wouldn't even know that they were there, because of some of them just don't like these cameras, period. Mm-hmm. And some of them are, they love to get their picture taken almost, it seems. And then others that they just shy away from it. So I just want to do my due diligence and try to make sure that I was covering, both strategies. I a couple of the spots too, I had mock scrapes on, and had a lot of bucks on both of them coming into those. And in 2019, I had him on a mock scrape a lot that year. So I was thinking that maybe I could get him back onto some scrapes again to get some pictures of him, but I just never did. I never got one picture of that deer.
So what do you do in a situation like that where you're just hoping he'll show up, but he never does? Did you still hunt those properties hoping to see him, or were you staying out until you had confirmation he was there and focusing elsewhere? How did that affect your strategy?
Well, the way I looked at it, I was just going to stay out and just wait and see if he showed up. But the one thing I wasn't going to do is sit back and wait for a ghost and waste my whole season waiting on something that's not there. And so I had that non-typical, the one with the flyers and the junk on the bases. And he was the biggest buck that I knew of that year that was around a lot. So I just put all my effort and time into that deer, and had an awesome game of cat and mouse with him throughout the season. And then I think it was on November 4th, I ended up shooting that buck. I seen him in the morning, and he pushed a doe back into what I thought was his bedding area, because I'd found a shed. I found one of his sheds back there from the year before. And so I went in, hung my 1.0, which I had 2 trails coming out. One was just beat down with huge tracks and like a couple just monster rubs coming off of it. One was kind of a faint trail, but it had a couple of his big tracks, what I thought was his big tracks, coming out into this cut bean field. And so I went in there and hung that set. He stood up out of his bed. He was with that doe. He was probably 80 yards away when he stood up. And I knew from in the morning, because she was wanting to feed in that bean field, I was like, I just knew that more than likely they were going to move back out. And I was hoping the trail that I had to split the difference on those trails, and I favored obviously the one with the most sign on it and set myself up. I'm a left-handed shooter, and so I set myself up with that trail on the right side of me, so as they move past, I could take that shot. Well, go figure, he follows that doe over on the other trail to my left-hand side,
of course,
which was my back side, and I ended up shooting him. That's probably the farthest I ever shot a buck with my bow. I think it was like 40 yards through the woods, and he ran like 50 yards and died. But so here's the funny thing about this whole situation is, so 2 of my buddies they're tagged out, right? And one buddy meets me. He meets me up at the farm, at the barn, and we're sitting in my truck and we're waiting on my other buddy to show up, and we're going to go pull this deer out that I just shot. And my cell cam goes off, and Woody was on my camera on the main farm where I've been getting pictures of him in 2019 that night.
He's back.
Yep, he's back, and now I'm tagged out.
What did he look like that year? How much, so now were you guesstimating he was 4 or 5? Is that right?
Yeah, so he was either 4 or 5 last year is what I thought. Kind of a lot like he did before. It was like he had the same configuration, non-typical. He had some stickers and stuff coming off of his G2s and G2s and G3s that year, and which he didn't this past year. Didn't have any of the stickers, and so then still had the split brows. He's always kind of carried that, and but I thought he was going to. I thought his frame was going to get a lot bigger because of the way he looked when he was young. And but he was still an awesome deer, big brows. But so sorry about my dog up there barking.
That's okay.
But I told my buddies, I'm like, how's it possible that deer is going to show up I just shot that buck like 4 hours ago. Now he's going to show back up and, show up in there. It was funny too, because after he showed up over there, he stayed there all season after that.
Now, what do you think that was about? Like, do you have any guesses as to why, like, so why he showed up at the beginning of the rut kind of, and then just stuck it out the rest of the year? Do you have any thoughts on what happened there? Pressure around him or what?
The only thing I can think of is that property that sold was when they first bought that place. I did see them ride some 4-wheelers back that way, side by side, stuff like that. And there was a small woodlot. So I don't know if maybe the pressure kind of got to him to where maybe he just relocated. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. That's the only thing that I can think of that made him move over there. And it's funny because he was over there, all year after that. My farmer buddy that lets me hunt there, he kept messing with me. He doesn't deer hunt, but he has a little bit in the past, and he kept messing with me. He kept saying, "I'm going to go shoot that big buck." I'm like, and what am I, he gives me permission. So what am I going to say? Don't go shoot that buck. It's not, but he just liked to antagonize me, I think, with it is what he was doing. And, I think he even called me one time and said, "Hey, I just shot that buck." I'm like, and I remember sitting there thinking for a second, I'm like, I was like, what? And then I was like, "You want me to come help you get him out?" He goes, "Nah, I didn't shoot him." I'm like, "What?"
That's brutal.
So, yeah. So, but yeah, he stayed on there all year. And then in December, mid-December, I got some trail cam pictures of him, and he was holding up his back leg. And he looked like he lost some weight. Looked like he had like something going on, like high in one of his hips. And then his back hoof looked like it was like really swelled up or something. I couldn't figure out what was going on in the pictures. And it wasn't a week after that, he dropped both. It was like December 19th or 20th, and he dropped both sides. Wow. And I thought for sure, I was like, oh boy, this is never good. 9 times out of 10, I see this happen. It seems like they don't make it through the winter with those kind of injuries. So I don't know if this helped or not, but I really poured the feed to that deer. We can bait and use minerals and everything here. So I did. I really put the minerals out and feed, and I was just trying to get him, through that winter is really what I wanted to do. But walked my tail off. I think I logged like 15 miles or something like that on Onyx, tracking my steps, trying to find those sheds, and I never found either side, because my hopes was if I could locate those sheds, that was just going to at least give me hopefully if they were back in a bedding area or something like that, maybe that could be like a little piece of the puzzle or piece that I could use going into next season to maybe at times set up on him to kill him.
Yeah. So that brings up another question. Now that you he's there, you're hoping he survives. You've had pictures of him on the main property again. You looked for the sheds. Were you doing any other on the ground scouting to just try to better get to know the area? Was there anything else you were doing to try to kind of narrow or try to kind of get in tight on what this deer is doing and figuring him out for the next year at this point?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I did a lot of winter scouting that year. Just, obviously I was trying to find those sheds to hopefully dial something, but I did find a couple. I found 2 different areas I know for sure that he was bedding in a lot. And there was 5 size rubs in both of those areas. And the only thing that I could figure out what he was doing was those were the spots that he was bedding based off of two different wind directions. And what I probably missed on, and probably the thing that I didn't, I guess, dial myself in, is one of the spots. It was, I think he probably, not so much from a wind standpoint, but more so on a visual standpoint, because it didn't dawn on me at that moment in time, but later it did. After I seen him doing something, after I seen him doing a few things during the season, because the one thing I did, pick up on during the season that I was hunting in this past season was that deer liked to walk with the wind at his butt all the time. And I've killed a lot of deer on, those edge winds and or just maybe the way that, thermals work in a certain area or something like that. But I mean, that deer, I don't know how many different times I've seen him walk with the wind right at his butt.
Why do you think that was? Like, was it just something about his bedding areas that the only bedding area he could use would not give him a good wind direction to go to certain food sources, or just a weird personality trait, or what?
I think it was more from a visual standpoint. I think he would bed in these certain spots, cover his back trail, but then be able to walk because of the way that, the area was with the small woodlots, flat farmland, a lot of fence rows, that kind of stuff. And I didn't make even this past season hunting him a few times. I still almost had in my mind at times of hunting him more so like he was going to use the wind a lot more than what he did. I think he used his vision more than anything.
Interesting. So you found these two bedding areas. You never found his sheds. You're slowly putting some of these pieces together. Work me through 2022 as you start to see him again, and what are these next steps after that?
2022, same thing as I typically always did, but I loaded up the farm. Actually, I loaded up the main farm where I've been always getting pictures of him, where he kind of took up residency there in 21, and put a small food plot in as well. And then on the other two pieces that I had, just in case, because I thought, this is a good chance this deer goes back to those, to that area over there on the, the other wood lot. I put a small food plot in there as well, just in case, like as a backup plan, in case he decided to move back to that area or whatever, and have some things set up for him. He never moved back to that area. He in the summer, he stayed on that main farm all summer. I could go over there and watch him almost every single evening if I wanted to in the beans.
Wow.
He was over there with like 5 or 6 other bucks, and he was just in those beans, constantly. And I was super hopeful that he was going to stick around. I was a little nervous about once he shed velvet, if he might, do another disappearing act or whatever, but all the way right up till season, he shed his velvet and didn't seem like he was going anywhere. So 2 weeks prior to season starting, my buddy that lets me hunt that farm, he's got an old grain barn there, and it's got a second story to it, and you can open up this door that's on the top. And when you do that, you can see the entire bean field out through there. So I remember, saying to myself, I'm gonna every single evening for the next 2 weeks, I'm gonna be up here.
That's amazing.
I'm gonna have this deer figured out before season rolls in, and then I'm just gonna, try to play off that and see if he continues to do that. He was super visual. I mean, I could go over there and see him all the time, even after he shed his velvet. I mean, he was in there. But the one thing that he did, he had about 4 different places he'd come out. And he had 2 different fence rows that he'd come out of, and he had 2 different woodlots that he would come out of. And it wasn't always based upon wind. Sometimes it was he come out with the wind in his face, and sometimes he came out with the wind right at his butt. So I couldn't quite figure out exactly where he liked to, where he would like to spend the majority of his time. There was one little spot that he kind of favored a little bit. It was by some pine trees. And it seemed like that was a little more favorable, but there was a location in the field on a fence row, and there was a little waterway that it just seemed like most of the time, wherever he came from, he ended up going through that waterway. And I just thought, well, if I can get a dead west wind and come down that fence row and slide into one of those trees right there, pretty good chance I'm going to get a shot at him. So opening day season, that morning I glassed, seen him that morning, glassed that evening. Again, I didn't have the wind, so I just stayed out, because I think that's where some of us make a mistake is we just want to get in there too soon. Sometimes the best hunting is no hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And the next morning, which would have been Sunday morning, second day of Ohio season, I wanted to play it. I was really hoping the wind was switching, and it was going to come. They were saying west with a touch of southwest to it, and I was really hoping that he was going to, go in and bed somewhere that morning, and I was going to treat it like a turkey hunt, where basically I put him to bed, and then I was going to move in. I didn't want to go in there. I think guys can go in there, mess around, check cameras, hang a stand, whatever. I didn't want to touch any of that until okay, I'm going in there to hunt, So I never seen him that morning. So I was a little bummed about that, but I still had a really good idea and where I wanted to be for that evening, because I felt like too, it was a safe set where I could go in and get out without too much damage. If worst case and he was out in one of the fields or something like that, I could either call my buddy that hunts the place or that owns the place, and he could drive back and pick me up, or I could call my wife or something like that and have her come drive back and pick me up, and then that way he wouldn't see me get down, and that whole thing. I went in there, I hung that 1.0 in that fence row, and seen a ton of deer. The deer were they were really moving that night, and had several deer come right by me. And then right towards the end of the evening, probably about an hour before dark, he came out of those pines, and he was coming all the way across that bean field, and he was going to come right out in front of me. It would have been a 25-yard shot. And right at the last minute, I don't know why he did this. He ended up cutting in behind me, which is something I'd never seen him do before. And he started to cut in behind me. And I thought, and my wind is blowing straight back down that fence row. And I thought, man, I'm going to have to shoot him. I'm going to have to shoot him before he gets that fence row, because if he gets that fence row on, I'm done. And I'd ranged that as he's walking. I'd ranged the opening I had right there, and I thought it was going to be about a 32-yard shot. I drew on the deer, and I was at full draw, and I had to let him clear one branch, and the wind kicked a little southwest, and he got me. He nailed me. And I thought he was going to get stupid enough to take a couple more steps, because it's really all I needed. And, sometimes like they'll smell you. And then they're like, I think I smelled what I think, but I'm going to take those couple more steps so I can get that little bit more. And he just never did. When he decided to move, he just bolted out of there.
Heartbreaker.
Yeah, because I felt like a lot of that work that I put in the summer was like, man, I just made this way harder on myself than I was expecting. I would have rather not even seen the deer than that to happen.
Yeah. You had 99.99% of everything go right, and then the worst possible thing happens at the last possible moment. It's not a good feeling.
No, it's funny, that night, a good friend of mine, actually my buddy that I was with the evening that I got a trail cam picture of when I shot my buck the year before, he shot just a stud 8-pointer that night. And so he's all excited. So I'm going over there to help him. And, I'm over there. It was like he's on the highest of highs and I'm on the lowest of lows. And, we're pulling out this great big, huge split G2 8-point. I mean, just probably 160-inch deer.
Whew.
And I remember him saying, he goes, dude, I can see the look on your face. He's like, you'll kill him. I'm like, man, I feel like I just screwed it all up. I said, it's early in the season. I mean, I got plenty of time to recover, but man, I hate hunting them when they know they're hunted.
Yeah. So what was the next move then? He got you. Now what? What was the, what was the plan? And then walk me through quickly to like the next moment of consequence in this story.
So after that, I decided to back off. I was like, okay, I'm not going to hunt. I'm going to get back in that barn again. And just, I'm going to watch my cameras, but I'm going to glass a lot and just try to use. That's one thing I've definitely changed as I've gotten older, is I don't feel like I need to hunt all the time. That I tell you, glassing is just so important. And if you can glass a ton and then make your moves according to what you see based off of a visual sighting rather than always a trail cam picture like I think a lot of us have gotten really used to doing. I think you're picking up on things or seeing small things that you wouldn't see from a trail camera. So I spent a couple nights up in that barn. I seen him again. It was 2, 3, 4 nights before I seen him again, and he was not on the cameras as much as he was either. So I definitely affected what he was doing before. So he started to be a little predictable coming out of one spot a little bit. So I made a move, went over, hung a set when I got the wind, went in there, sat, he came out on totally opposite, on the other end of the bean field out of another woodlot. So, I seen that. So I'm like, okay, tomorrow night I'm going to be over there. So I jump over there on the other side. He comes out right in front of where I sat the night before.
God, I know this feeling too well.
Oh, I know, because I've followed a lot of your hunts over the years, and you have been through the same thing.
Yes. So sorry, continue on.
So it was like, you know how it is. It's like you zig, they zag, and it's like, and that's kind of just started what was going on, and then I would think, I'm hunting too much. I'm going to back off for a little bit, and then, I was in that barn all the time. I mean, I spent a lot of time glassing that deer out of there, and then would make my moves, and I noticed it was probably mid-October now. So our season came in September 24th, I think, this year. And it was mid-October now. And I noticed that he started coming out of that little spot where the pines were again. So, and I noticed him coming out of there twice. And both times he had the wind to his butt. And I thought, man, I need to be able to get over there, but I'm worried because now I'm picking up on it. I'm like, he's bedding where you can see is what it is. And that's why he's not using the wind to come out. He's using his sight. So, my buddy that owns the place, they were getting ready to start picking beans and stuff like that. And so I asked him, I said, hey, there's any way that you could, buzz me down there on the tractor and just keep the tractor going and stuff like that. I'm gonna hang the set and climb in. He goes, yeah, I don't care. So he takes me down there and drops me off and just stays there. I hang that set. And that night, seen a bunch of deer, mostly does. And right at last light, I was just getting ready to get down, and I heard something coming. I mean, it was pretty dark, and I couldn't see him because those pines are so dark inside the woods where those pines were. And the next thing I know, I see a deer, and it comes directly underneath me and comes out. And I was trying to see what it was, but I couldn't tell until he got out into the beans. And then I was able to put my binoculars on him because it was so dark, and it was him. And he walked, right underneath me. And he got out into those beans, and I had a steady, probably 15 mile an hour wind that night. So, and it was definitely in my favor. And he got out there, and he acted like he knew something was up. I could tell. I was watching through the binoculars. I just think they got that sixth sense.
Oh yeah.
And they just know, and I could just tell. And he kind of walked out of there a little stiff-legged, and I thought, man, here we go again, So he must have knew something was up, because the very next day, I got a buddy that hunts just down the road. And keep in mind, this deer has not been on him all year. And he texted me the next morning and said, hey, Woody was on me yesterday. And he sent me a couple trail cam pictures of him. And I was like, oh, really? And I was sitting there thinking, I was like, oh gosh, here we go. Now
pushed him on out.
I just thought he's gonna end up killing us, kill this buck. It was fun. But it was kind of funny because we had a funny conversation, because he's like, he calls me the next day. He says, hey, I'll talk to you about something. I said, I already know what you're going to say. I'm like, if you think that I'm going to be upset, mad, whatever about a deer, if he walks in, I said, if that deer walks in front of you, you better kill him. He said, well, he goes, people get funny about these deer and they get attached to them and this and that. And he's an older guy too. And I said, dude, that thing gets in front of you. You got to shoot that. You got to shoot that buck. Like, I know it is what it is. I mean, it's a wild animal. I mean, I don't own the deer, it's not mine. It's the state's, at that point. And it was funny, but the deer, he didn't stick around over there, but maybe a day, and then was back.
So you've now had two kind of known educational moments with the deer where he's learned something about you hunting him, and then you've been, trying to figure him out along the way too. What was going through your mind now at this point as you're trying to figure out, at least one of the things I'm thinking about as you're telling me this story is I'm getting stressed out because of how, you've been very reliant on seeing this deer coming in and out of a bean field. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, man, how much longer is this buck going to stay on this bean field pattern where it's coming in and out of here? And what are you going to do when he moves off to some other food source and never comes out into that field anymore? So were you feeling like timing pressure with that too, where you were like, gosh, I got to make a move on him on this thing because he keeps on doing it, but tonight might be the last night he does this, because any time now those beans are going to be harvested, or he's going to move on to something else, acorns or corn on the neighbors or something. So there's this, I think we all have this thing where we know like we have to be careful with timing and we have to try to take our shot at the right moment, but at the same time, like, you never know how fleeting that moment might be. So how were those kinds of things being worked out in your head as you're trying to figure out what to do next? Was it like, again, I got to fall back and be patient again, or were you starting to think, God, I got to get aggressive because he might disappear?
To me, I felt like I needed to start, like I just needed to get aggressive, because I knew, any day, my buddy was going to pick those beans. He was already picking beans other places and was getting ready to pick those beans over there. And I knew too from our conversations too that he was going to put a lot of liquid lime on those fields. So that was, all those things. So yeah, I mean, I was definitely feeling the pressure to get this deer down. And the problem was like, it just, I didn't have the woodlots are so small with the fence rows and stuff like that. There's not, there's only so many moves that you can make and so many different trees that you can get in. So, I'd gotten permission on a little tiny piece that butts up against the thicket one of the thickets that he was staying in, and where I could literally come through their yard, and with any kind of south wind, I could jump up into a couple little pine trees right there, and I kind of overlooked that. And it was like a real safe in and out. And it was like, I felt like it was a better morning set, because I figured if they're out in the fields, then I can catch them coming back into that spot and maybe milling around before they bed up or whatever for the morning. So I'd sat there one morning, and I'm pretty sure that I caught a glimpse of him one morning. And I was hoping to, maybe get a crack at him there. So, there's just so many places that you can go, and then you start repeating the same things again. And then I feel like when you start repeating the same things again, that he's got you at that point. So I was definitely feeling it.
How do you go about, your hunt, I guess frequency then at that point? Because that then becomes the next question, is then you're feeling the pressure of timing, but you, like you said a second ago, you only had so many spots you could go. So I think at this point you're like, okay, I can either hunt these same handful of spots, like I've got a handful of moves I can play. You keep doing those things enough time and hope that the volume approach eventually pays off, or did you take the opposite, which is, man, I'm just going to stay out because I only have 3 or 4 good things I could really do. I just need to wait until the perfect day, and then I'll strike at one of those things to keep the pressure low. Like, how do you, which approach did you end up taking?
I ended up at that point taking the approach of volume and a lot of sets and a lot of, I was running out of time. I just knew that, once they were going to be in there, they'd probably be in there for, 2-3 days, harvesting beans and all that kind of stuff going on. And then I wasn't sure on this liquid lime situation and what that might do to it, to the whole farm in general. So, I know that he also had, he was also at some point, he was going to turn those fields over. And once he turned those fields over, I knew that those deer were, it was going to be like a ghost town.
Yeah.
As soon as that happened. I just had, I've been in that situation before where the fields get turned over and it's like a light switch gets turned on or turned off because there's just nothing, there's nothing there to eat. They're going to go find something to eat.
Yep.
And I had a feeling one morning, I got pictures of it on a cell cam, and I just had a hunch where I thought he might be going back into bed that morning, because it was like maybe an hour before it got light. And so I went in, hung a set, and had him coming across the field through that waterway again, but was coming over towards this woodlot, and I felt like he was going to take this, I'd gotten some pictures of him over there before taking this one particular trail, and he had a couple big rubs that just opened up over there that I seen like a couple days prior to that. So I just went on a hunch because sometimes just following your gut. I've done that where I follow my gut and kill deer, and then I've had those gut feelings before where I didn't follow it and would have killed deer if I would have followed it. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did that morning. I went in there, hung that set. He started coming right across that field, and the way he was coming in, I was like, man, this is going to be a 15-yard shot. And about that time, as he's coming across, it's just breaking daylight. Here come the liquid lime trucks.
No.
Yep. And for three days straight, it was semi after semi after semi of trucks. It never let off. And he just kind of disappeared from the farm. And I was so frustrated at that point. And all that activity back there, when all that was going on, there was, the farmer and the side-by-side driving around back there. And there's just so much activity back there. I was like, man, there's just I was so I told, we have a piece that we hunt out in Illinois, and my buddy Heath was getting ready to go out there. And I told him, are you going out to Illinois? He said, I am. I said, I think I need some new scenery, or I'm going to pull my hair out. And I said, I think I'm going to come out there and maybe hunt for a long weekend or something. And then by that time, it's, last couple of days of October and the first couple of days of November, and it got really warm. And we were out there, and it was like a ghost town. There wasn't much going on. So it was kind of a busted little trip. Neither one of us had any luck. It was so warm. It was,
it was an awful spell of weather.
Yes, it was bad.
So yeah, sorry, continue.
Well, so then I just came back after that, and he went missing for a while, and I was just trying to locate where the heck he could be. And then my farmer, he was getting ready to turn those fields over, and I knew that once that happened, that was going to really, really hurt that farm. So I spent a lot of time driving around and glassing, and then he started turning those fields over, and it was I located him, and there was a couple pieces I was going to try to get permission on.
So hold on really quick. Sorry. When you say you located him, so you were driving around, you glassed him in a field on some other property? Is that what happened?
Yep.
Got
Yep. I glassed him on another property, and I knew that I needed to get access back in there. He was still showing up at night mostly on the main farm, and but I knew I had to get permission, and so one day during the day, I went and knocked on some doors, got a real hard no from a guy.
Gotta love those.
I mean, like, to the point where it was making me mad just to talk to this guy. Like, the guy was ridiculous. And then went to another place, got a maybe, need to talk to my wife kind of thing about it, and then got a yes. And then the maybe turned into a yes later on that evening. The guy called me.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, we're good. So I just had to go over there and get my permission slip.
So what's your approach with this? Because you've now done this 2 years in a row. You've learned something about where this buck is, and then picked up additional access around it. That's some extra work and extra stress that a lot of guys won't go through. And it seems like this is something that has worked for you. What's your approach to those door knocking scenarios? What are you doing that's leading to 4 yeses in 2 years in one relatively small area? You must be doing something right.
I guess my approach is I just go there and just say, hey, look, I would love the opportunity to hunt your property. I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested in all the deer. I'm just interested in one deer, kind of thing. And strictly just a bow hunter, and a lot of times too, it always helps to maybe if you can do a little bit of research on the people too, just to kind of maybe have some avenues, maybe some things maybe to talk about, to get them comfortable with you. Mm-hmm. It always helps to, like, when you live in the area. So, because that seems like it always gets brought up. Well, where do you live?
Yeah.
It seems like that always gets brought up. And so that definitely helps. Sometimes too, maybe just, hey, do you mind if I run a camera? And don't even ask them for permission to hunt. But in this case, I didn't have that opportunity. I really needed to. The one lady I did ask, hey, can I run a camera? And but it was like, when I put that camera out, I think he was one of the first deer that showed up on it.
Wow.
So it was, I think the very next day I was like going right back over there or whatever, and I think I was in there hunting within the next couple of days after that or something. But he was still, like, now we're talking, like, now it's, first going into the second week of November. And so, man, he just seemed to be he was on his feet. He actually showed back up on my buddy's place a couple different times in between there. And, but thank God by then he was tagged out. So he'd already shot a big tank of a buck and he was tagged out. And, but he would just, it was weird. It was like over there, he would just show up for a day and then he'd be gone. And for an older class deer, it's kind of funny how much he would bounce around on these places.
What's the distance we're talking about between some of these locations we're talking? Is this like he came from this 100 acres to that 100 acres, or is it like he traveled a mile or what?
I would say probably close to a mile. Probably pushing that he would travel from, the new permission that I got to, my buddy's place over there. And he's crossing some roads and stuff like that in between there too, that gets some traffic on him. So, I had that worry too going on.
Yeah. So how are you basing your hunts now? Because you've got these 2 new extra properties. You have your main farm. If my memory is right, you've got these 2 other access points you got the year prior. You got a lot of access now. You've got cameras across all of it, it sounds like. You've seen him in a handful of different places. The first thing that comes to my mind now is like paralysis analysis. Or analysis paralysis, sorry. You got a lot of options. You got a deer that's moving all over the place during the rut. How are you making decisions at this point about where to go? Because I know that I've been in that kind of situation, not the exact same, but you can sometimes be like chasing your tail, where you get like a picture of him yesterday, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go there, and then he's half mile away the next day. Were you chasing trail camera pictures? Were you trying to predict where he would be and go somewhere different than what the intel was telling you? How did you approach this next phase?
I was probably chasing trail cam pictures at this point more than anything, just because I knew that he was getting hooked up with does as well. So I knew that, a lot of times, like now, we're in November, I just knew that, if he was in a spot and say I got pictures of him with the doe or something like that, then pretty good chance that, I needed to be in there because, more than likely he wasn't going to be, pushing her very far, from that area. And one evening I did set up in there. I set up in this little ash tree, and I had to set really low because of the way the brush was and the cover there. And I just got in a couple sticks high, and I was in this little crotch. And I set up in there, and he came out of the neighbor's property, out of the thicket, and he was like frantically looking for his doe that he lost. And now he's probably 150, 200 yards away when he was doing this. And nothing I could do about it because he was over on the neighbor's piece. And I knew that there was a little hunting that went on over there. So I never did try to get any permission on that piece. And he was just running all over the place and trying to find her. And I just was trying to I did have a lot, like the pieces that I picked up were small, like one was 5 and one was 6 acres. I mean, so they're just small, little tiny pieces. So I just had to, it was more about getting in a lot of sits. And so that's kind of what I was doing. And then I went out to Illinois for 3 or 4 days. I was kind of trying to play the weather a little bit, and I went out there and I timed it perfectly. And I was into good bucks every day, and ended up shooting a really nice 10 point when I was out there, and then here's the funny thing. I'm out there. I have a good friend that I stay with whenever I'm out there, and him and I are out to eat, and I'm getting pictures of Woody, broad daylight pictures, and I show him. He goes, "What are you doing out here?" And I'm like, "Man, I only got, I don't have a lot of time in the year to come out here." I said, "But, our season at home goes all the way till, the first Saturday in February.
Yeah.
I got a lot of time to hunt out there, but I don't have a lot of time to hunt here." So I just figured I'd come out, and I was lucky enough, I made a short trip out of it and ended up putting a good 10 down. And, so I came back, got on him. And I wasn't seeing him in a whole lot. And I got pictures of him one morning. He was on a doe, and you could tell 100% he was with this doe. I went in there. It was an after work hunt, and he was real early on that field the day before. Got in there, set up, and he came out on this doe it was probably 3:30, and followed her all the way across the field. Then they ended up working their way all the way back up to me. And it was she worked her way straight to me. And I had to watch them make this slow walk all the way to me. I remember at one point, I put my head down because I had myself so worked up. I said, I can't look at him anymore. And he comes all the way in. The doe starts to angle out. He's at 25, 26 yards. And I draw. And when I drew, I think he heard me draw, and then he ended up looking up at me when I was at full draw. And I shot right over his back. And
he ducked the arrow, or the shot was high?
I think it was both. I think the shot was high, but he also, because I videoed it, watching the footage, he also ducked. But
yeah,
I went through a weird situation this year where I'd shot a single pin for the last 10 years. And then last year, one of my first elk hunt, I decided to put a 5-pin sight on my bow because just not ever elk hunting. It was the first time I ever elk hunted, and I thought, well, I want to have multiple pins. I don't want to have a dial where maybe I don't have the time to do that. There's the uncertainty of an elk hunt kind of thing going on for me. And I'll just say this, when I was in Illinois, the first morning I was there, I missed one high. The third morning I was there, I hit one high through the tenderloin. And I'm just being real. And I just went through I had some bad mojo or something going on this year.
Now this buck, Woody, you miss him high.
Yeah.
So you had real serious mojo problems at that point. How'd you handle that? I mean, I've been in a similar situation. That is a low pit to dig yourself out of. How did you deal with it?
I tell you what, Mark, I was so frustrated with that whole thing. I mean, as soon as I missed that shot, as soon as he took off with that doe out of there or whatever. It's funny too, because it wasn't shortly after I missed him, like they run out to the field a little bit and he started dogging that doe again.
Of course.
And then they were gone. I just got down immediately and I was so frustrated. I mean, it was only like, I think I missed that deer. It was probably 4:00 or something that evening when I missed him. I was back at the house, and it's funny because my wife came in the backyard. She's like, I thought you were hunting tonight. I said, oh, I already did. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I missed him. She's like, oh, are you kidding me? I'm like, no. I'm like, I got to figure it out because something's going on. And well, what I figured I was doing, I was going in the backyard all the time, and I was just, I was shooting my 40-yard pin all the time is what I was practicing all the time. And I had a 20 that was green, a 30 that was red, and a 40 that was green. And I was just going in the backyard, and what I was doing throughout the whole season, I would just take a couple shots before I went out and hunted. And I think what I was doing, and I mean, just to be real, because this is really what I did, is I think that I was shooting that 40-yard pin, practicing it all the time. So then when the moment of truth would happen, I would go straight to that 40.
Yeah. That makes sense. You default to the usual kind of automatic process, right? I mean, in that moment when it's so hard to be thinking through everything, your body just switched to what it had been doing. I get it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was doing, but here's the funny thing: it didn't dawn on me when I was at home. The true story: I got up that night in the middle of the night. It was about 1:30. I got up in the middle of the night to go take a leak, and I'm literally I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing. It just dawned because I was thinking about that, I was just thinking about the bed, and I woke up and I was just thinking about the whole thing, and and just because those opportunities are just so far and few, and when you get one, you got to make it count. Like you can't have stuff like that, because there's a good chance that you might not get another chance like that. So I got up that very next morning, and I tell you what, I took that sight off my bow. I had a Spot Hog single pin that I'd used for a long time, and I put that thing right back on, got that thing dialed in, and got back to what I was comfortable with. And I was, shooting great, but he disappeared for about 4 days, like no pictures, no sightings. He wasn't showing up on my buddy's place. Wasn't showing up on the main farm, none of the other spots. Like, he was definitely missing for a while. And I kind of backed off and was just kind of waiting for him to show kind of back up. And my farmer buddy calls me, it was on, I believe on the 28th of November, he calls me, he says, hey, it was in the evening. He goes, somebody just hit a deer out here. He said, and, he said, I think it was a buck. I was like, you got to be shitting me. So I drive over there, and the guy hit a deer. I went over to talk to him, and I'd asked him, I said, was it a buck or doe? He says, a buck. I was like, was it a big buck? Or, I'm like, this guy's just hit a deer, his truck's all smashed up. And he's like, I don't know, I'm not a hunter, it looked like a big buck to me, but how that could be, it could be a 100-inch deer or a 200-inch deer, like that. So, we jumped on a side-by-side, and we drove around. We were looking out through the fields and everything else. And then State Highway Patrolman came, and then he was helping us, and we were looking for the deer and stuff like that. And, so couldn't find the deer anywhere. So the next morning I get up to go to work, and, typically my morning consists of getting up in the morning, and it's like, during season, I don't get up and like work out or anything like that during the hunting season. 'Cause it's like, I don't have time. It's all about hunting at that point. Like I'll come back to that later in the year, but typically I get up in the morning, make a cup of coffee, and just look at trail cam pictures from cell cams. And I got up that morning and had some stuff going on a job. And cause, I run our operations for a commercial construction company. And I was already 6:30 in the morning, was already having issues on jobs. So I was on the phone, could barely get in the shower that morning to get out the door. And so never had a chance. Well, I pulled into the farm, on my drive, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to pull back there and just see if I can't see what deer that was. And when I pulled back into the farm to look, I seen a deer laying in the fence row. And I'm like, ooh, there's a deer right over there. And it was like right next to the tree that I set up on the second night of season where I'd almost killed him. And I put my binos, and it was a buck, and it was moving, and I was like, was that the buck that was hit? You know? Then it turns its head, and I'm like, ooh, that's Woody. So I sat there watching for just a little bit, and then I pulled my phone out, and I looked, and I was like, oh, man, I got a good wind. I started thinking, like, and then I didn't have a meeting till 9:30 that morning for work. So I'm like, well, I can give this a try. In worst case, I bump him and put him back over across the street where I think he's more killable anyways.
Were you thinking that he had been hit and that he was laying down there injured, or was that not what you were thinking?
I was thinking he was either hit and injured laying there, or just randomly bedded up there for the night and got kind of stuck in that spot. Okay. It's the only thing that I could think of. Or because I couldn't see any other deer that was with it. So I backed my truck up, threw my stuff on. Keep in mind, I got work pants on, like I got work jeans on, and throw my boots on, grab my bino harness and the whole 9 yards. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try it. What do I have to lose? So I had a wind that was just blowing, coming across me and out to the wide open field. And I was east coming west, and he was looking west. So I've never done it before, and I thought, why not? So I started in, and I just kind of pecked my way along, and I would, glass him, I'd range him, I'd glass him, and about 60 or 70 yards into the stalk, I noticed he was bedded with a doe. I couldn't see the doe before until I got that far, but she was looking west too. And so I just kept on creeping, crawling up through there, just took my time, and everything was wet from the night before too. So it was kind of an ideal situation. And it was a little bit breezy too that morning. So, and I just kept on, and I got to 28 yards, and I thought, man, I'm going to try to, I need to try to get an arrow in this deer, because I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get any closer than that. Yeah. And at one point he turned his head and he started looking. If he would have kept bringing his head all the way back around, he would have nailed me. And he just stopped and didn't. And then he took his head and moved it back looking towards the doe. And it's weird. I've never shot a deer from the ground, especially I've never shot one laying down. So, I mean, angles are completely different. Yeah. And where you're going to place this arrow, because I always like to think too, like whenever I'm shooting an animal, where's it going to exit? I think I think a lot of times that's probably a big thing that we need to think about when shooting an animal, is where it's going to exit, just as much as anything.
Yeah.
And, so it's just weird, so I just kind of picked a spot. And here's what's funny is, like, when I was at full draw and I'm trying to move my body into position, it was covering, what was covering up, part of his vitals was some branches that I had trimmed off those trees when I hunted.
The irony.
So I kind of moved around, and let it fly. And I knew I made a good solid hit on him. And he'd ran down and then just kind of went into this other little section. Well, the doe took off with him, and they ran down through there. And so then,
real quick,
I walked back.
Real quick,
yeah.
Before you go any further,
Mm-hmm.
I got to get a sense of how you handled that moment of truth. Coming off of, the 3, prior tough situations with the shots. And then you ripped off the sight, put the new sight on. You're shooting differently than you had been all year. What was going through your mind when you finally have this second opportunity after all of this bad mojo? Were you just on autopilot again and you weren't even thinking about that stuff? Or did you have I don't know, what was your inner dialogue during this? Because I feel like this is incredibly high stakes after a lot of tough, adversity you had to push through. This is a moment. What was going on during this moment?
I tell you what, my mind was in a place of almost like an angry state of mind of just get it done.
Yeah.
Just get the job done. This is it. Just get it done. I wasn't when I had to watch him, when I missed him that time, when I had to watch him come all the way across the field and everything, man, I had myself rattled numerous times.
Yep.
In that moment. This, I wasn't like that. I was in a different state of mind. And I would say this, I don't know if this happens to you. There's times where certain deer, certain situations, whatever, sometimes I get worked up. I get fired up to where I can just hear my heartbeat in my ears.
Yeah.
And then there's other times that I just don't get like that. Sometimes I just get into get it done kind of deal.
I kind of, in my head, I was called business time. It's just you're just locked in is how I feel in those moments. Just get it done. I agree.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I was, I was dead set in my head of he's not getting out of here without getting an arrow in him. There's no way. And, I think, that kind of, helped the situation really, instead of I think I had this build up when I missed him too. I think I missed that deer for, numerous reasons. Not just, poor shooting on my part or using the wrong pin or whatever. But I think too, I built that moment up in my head. And then when the moment, especially when you're hunting one specific deer and have a long history like that, it's easy to build that up in your head where now here is the moment of truth. And now you got to make it happen. And when you got to watch them for a long time like that too, it doesn't help at all.
Yeah.
So I think in this moment, it was all and I was moving, I was moving and I wasn't forced to be stationary to where when I did make a move, it was draw my bow, get the pin on him, the whole 9 yards. So I think that just, I don't know, I think I had a different state of mind. and I think that helped a lot.
So you got the shot. You said they ran off another direction. Was this the nice, easy recovery we all dream of, or was there more to the story?
So after that, I went. Now, keep in mind, I had a meeting at 9:30. Right. So I went back to my truck, and then drove back to the house, sat in my truck, and took my. I had a Teams meeting for a project, and it's kind of funny that my boss and I were good friends, and he made a joke. He made some kind of wisecrack or something in the meeting. Oh, somebody had asked me something about getting them over some information or something. I said, yeah, I'll send it over to you. And he had said, yeah, he probably already have it over to you. He said, but he's always deer hunting. And he said, he said something along the lines. He was like, yeah, but he can't get it done this year or something. He was busting my chops about something, about me not being able to get my deer this year or whatever. I said, well, it's funny you say that. I said, I just shot him. And he said, no. I said, yeah, I did. He goes, send me a picture. I said, I haven't even found him yet. I said, I had to get on this call with you guys.
Oh, man.
So I called a buddy after that. And then, it was a pretty quick recovery. Found him. Didn't take us very long to find him. And it's funny, it's a bittersweet thing when you've known of a deer that long, got all this history with them, and then chase them for an entire season like that and everything. It's kind of a weird thing. I'm sure a lot of guys know this feeling, but it's you're never going to get to see him again, or trail cam pictures again, or whatever. And so it was funny because it was like on the recovery, and then like even taking some pictures and stuff of him and everything too. It was almost kind of like, this is what I've been waiting for, but it's a very bittersweet moment for whatever reason.
Yeah, it's like we were talking about earlier today. It's the ending of something that was so much fun. You feel a little empty though when that thing is actually done. Like I've always found like you said, like you're glad it happened, but at the same time you want to keep going. Because it's just such a cool thing to get to follow these animals and studying them and hunt them and wonder and think and strategize and see them every once in a while or a lot and build that. I don't know if relationship's the right word, but you build some kind of connection. I can definitely relate to that. Now I'm curious with you, if you're like me, I've realized with myself, like I need what I found my weird obsession. Like I've almost need to have one at least that like I'm chasing. So like I'll kill one of these deer that I've been after for years, and then like the very next day I'm like, okay, now it's going to be this buck, and I'm like already studying pictures and I'm outglassing or something. Like I almost have like a rebound, like getting over a breakup or something, like immediately after I'm back out there because I need to like be thinking about the next one. My wife's always so confused. Like, you just killed a deer yesterday. Why do you need to get out watching again tomorrow or hunt tomorrow or whatever? I'm like, I just want to keep it going a little bit. Are you like that?
Oh, I'm 100% like that for sure. I get right back into it, and I'm already like thinking about the next one. And I was just telling a buddy, we got talking about the same exact thing. And I said, I'll be honest with you, I'm a little depressed. I said, because going into next year, I don't know. I don't have a whole lot. I think two of the other bucks I was excited about maybe hunting next year, I think they're both dead. So, so it's, right now it's not looking that part of it's not looking very promising, but,
yeah,
that's the fun of, that's the fun of it. Also is like, I always like, I think I enjoy, trying to find, new ground to hunt, new bucks to hunt. I always think it's always exciting when you get a new piece to hunt and you don't know anything about it. And,
yeah.
I don't know. I've probably got, probably over 25 bucks that would probably gross over 125 or whatever. And I think over the years, I'll bet you out of that, 18 of them all came from different properties over the years. Just because a piece of ground produced a good deer 1 year, I mean, it might be another 3 years before it does again.
Yeah.
So I think, you always have to be looking for, another piece, and trying to find, new ground, to hunt. Because if I just stayed stationary on what I've had for, say I was hunting 2 or 3 different farms for the last 10 years or whatever, that gets kind of boring for me. I like a new challenge, and I like to find new stuff to be able to, dive into and learn. Your buddy Andy May, he intrigues me on the fact that how quickly he can go out of state and get on good bucks on new ground.
Yeah.
That I enjoy listening to a lot of his stuff because, I think that's the other part of this whole journey too that you go on is like meet a lot of really good people over the years, and and me and Andy have chatted a little bit, and then just some of my buddies and stuff like that, where you pick up a lot of different things, and I think that's probably one of the cool things about I think you're the OG of the whole podcast, the whole hunting podcast thing. And it's, I would have died to have this information when I was first starting off.
Yeah.
I mean, the information that guys have now is just, man, I mean, I just used to, just trying to pick up magazines and trying to pick up tips from, other, just good hunters and stuff along the way. Like, I think that's the other part of it too, is always keep looking for new dirt and be open-minded to, taking a tip and listening to somebody and trying something out. I think that's the fun of it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of truth to that. Speaking of that, you recently posted over on Instagram about some of your greatest influences when it came to bow hunting, like your most impactful mentors of sorts. When you look at this hunt specifically and the things you did, the decisions you made, things that happened along the way, is there any one of your mentors or any other person, who shared information with you or that you picked up something from, kind of like you were just talking about? Is there anyone whose insights or guidance, led you or had the most impact on this hunt? Is there any one of those people you've got something from over the years that kind of comes to mind? Like, yeah, if it hadn't been for X person telling me this, or for me learning this thing from that guy, I probably never would have killed this buck. Is there any connection like that when you look back?
I would say probably there'd be it'd be kind of two-parted. You know, I always look back at the old articles and interviews and stuff like that with Miles Keller. And, you know, I felt like Miles was kind of like he was a master at, like, you know, finding big deer on new properties.
Mm-hmm.
And Miles was a little bit in regards to, like, you know, we were just talking about Andy. You know, Miles would find these big deer, and I mean, he'd have them down in 3-4 days. I mean, on quick hunts kind of thing. But, you know, but that's one thing that he was always out. That's what he was always out doing. It was always out trying to locate, big deer. Not so much just like, wow, that looks like a good piece of property. A lot of times he was visually seeing these deer and stuff like that. And I think that's how he killed a state record in Wisconsin. It was an 8-point that way years ago. I think that's one part of it, you know, like for me, like, you know, like this hunt going back and, you know, Woody making some different moves and stuff like that, and just trying to, you know, gain access to new properties. I would say that's, you know, maybe something I took from Miles. But then the other part of it is, you know, I'll always go back to this is being mobile, and that 100%, that was, you know, Andre, hands down, he showed me that whole world, and really has helped me, you know, early on understand the importance of being mobile, being unpredictable, being persistent, because he's 62 now, and that guy still hunts almost every single day. I just talked to him today, and he's still out there grinding away after one particular buck.
That's awesome.
I mean, the dude hunts. Trust me, I go through his footage every year, and he hunts every day. I mean, it's nuts. Like, so he's a grinder. So I would say some of that too. Just, you know, being persistent, grinding. You know, not giving up until you get the job done.
Yeah. So what'd you learn from this hunt? When you look back a few years from now and you think back on what this deer taught you, is there anything that stands out yet in your mind?
I would say probably the biggest thing would be, I think we all tend to think that these big mature bucks always use the wind. And this is not the first time that I've seen this, but he is definitely the one that I've seen use a visual way more than he ever used the wind to his advantage. That deer, I've never seen a mature buck walk with the wind as much as I did that one. But I think it probably more had to do with the fact of the terrain that buck was staying in. I think if you would have took that deer, say, you know, if he would have been in hill country, I think he would have been using a lot of thermals, you know, a little more, you know, rolling hills, farmland. You know, he, you know, might have been, you know, using that, you know, that 1/4 wind or something like that or whatever. But I just think this deer, I think the big thing and is just he had so, he could visually see so much. I think that was his game, and it kept him alive for, you know, 5 or 6 years of doing it.
Yeah.
So
I guess it's I was going to say it's a good reminder to never assume a deer is going to do like the thing they're supposed to do. Like every deer is an individual, and no rule applies to every deer in every situation. You always hear, oh, they want to have the wind in their favor to some way, and all these things. And if you always operate like it's always going to be like that, you are going to miss opportunities. You do need to constantly be looking for the exceptions to the rule. You can't factor anything. You can't write anything off before you can confirm it one way or the other.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's so just to become a better hunter. I think it's, I just think that's why it's always good to just, listen to other successful hunters or even guys that are starting to have a lot of success and stuff like that. Maybe they've caught on to something and trying to pick up tricks of the trade. It's, I've been in the trades for my entire career. I never went to college. I got out of high school and went straight into the trades. And the trades to me is a lot like, in some regards of being a good whitetail hunter. Like as you learn the trade, you learn the tricks of the trade, and you as you go along, you hone your skills over the years, and I think a lot of times a lot of that stuff comes from others that you had worked around, or in this case others that you heard say things and you tried to mimic it and seeing what worked for you and what didn't. But I always think of a tradesman and a woodsman as the same thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. Speaking of the I guess tricks of the trade that are particularly popular right now, one of those is this strong dependence a lot of folks have on cell cameras now, because they're an incredible tool. A lot of people are using them. I'm using them too. Yep. But you mentioned to me before we started recording that you had a little bit of an aha moment in regards to your very own camera dependence with this deer. Can you share that, what you realized after the hunt and what that maybe taught you to?
Yeah. So a couple weeks after I had shot Woody, I had pulled a cell cam, and when I was going through the SD card, because sometimes you don't always get every picture sent to you, or maybe you were buzzing through them real quick because maybe you had multiple cameras or whatever. So when I was looking through this SD card, I had pictures of Woody at 4:45 a.m. that morning, and on the farm that I killed him on, but in a different spot of the farm. And the only reason that I pulled into that farm that morning was because I was really trying to confirm whether or not the deer made it, and if he was laying out there in the field somewhere. And if I would have seen those pictures, I doubt I would have ever pulled in there that morning. I probably would have went straight into work, and I probably would have tried to figure out a spot to set up on him for that evening. And it goes back to, you get so dependent on these cameras all the time. It's like, well, whatever the camera tells you, that's how you make your next move. And I think it's just a huge mistake. And if I would have went off that camera and not hunted, I may not have had that deer yet. I may not have killed that deer at all this year.
Yeah.
And I think that they're a great tool. And like you said, I mean, we're both using them, and they're a great tool. But I think boots on the ground, a lot of glass. I don't think there's anything that replaces those two things.
Yeah. They still, I mean, just like any camera, they still just give you a tiny window into what's going on. And I think the funny thing with cell cameras is that because of that added benefit of it giving you, these quick updates and you can see what's happening day by day, we're lured into this false sense that they're more powerful than they really are. Like they seem like super cameras compared to regular trail cameras. And so a lot of folks now I think are just like sitting back and waiting for the pictures. And then as soon as they get the pictures, they go. And I'm willing to bet that cell cameras have led to a whole lot of bucks getting killed. Yeah, absolutely. But I bet you they've led to maybe just as many bucks not getting killed because guys just aren't going out there the way, like you just said, with boots on the ground or glass and eyes across the fields, and instead are just like overly dependent on a 10 by 15 yard window and hoping they see something that tells them what they need. And they're completely, forgetting about how important it is to still, get that full frame of view. And I imagine there's going to be like a recalibration in the coming years. Is right. We've kind of gotten like people have started using them a lot now, and now they're very, widespread in use. I think people are going to start to realize like, okay, this is not a silver bullet. Even though it's a great tool, you can't be so dependent. I think there's going to be like a not a blowback, but there'll be people refiguring it out now and realizing like, okay, there's certain ways these things work, and there's certain ways like they're still not going to be that magic bullet. And I'm certainly seeing that myself too.
Well, and here's a little story too that a friend of mine, this was probably 8 or 10 years ago now. No, maybe not that long. It was probably 5 or 6 years ago. So he had a farm, and there was a giant on this farm. It was in another state. The steer was a 240-inch buck.
Whoa.
World-class, mega giant. I mean, this deer was around. He had a couple cell cams, and then he had a couple regular cams on the farm. And he was not getting any pictures of that deer on that cell cams. And the other cameras, the standard SD card cameras, were more towards the interior portion of the farm. One was like in there's a big fence row that came down and kind of bottlenecked everything down, and he had one down there. He wasn't getting any pictures of that deer, so he didn't go in there and hunt that deer that year. And that buck was later found dead after season. They don't know what happened to it. And he checked those cameras, those standard SD cameras in there, and the whole month of November, that deer had been coming through that little bottleneck like every other day.
Oh no.
And if he would have just went in there and hunted and just got a visual of it, and here's the other thing about that deer, which was so weird, is the deer didn't make a lot of big sign. There wasn't a lot of big sign in there as far as big rub stuff like that. It was just mediocre sign. And then even upon finding the deer, if you've seen this deer's hoof, you would think it was like a big doe, because it just didn't have that big, massive four-finger hoof. And I've seen that other mature bucks before where, a big track doesn't lie. It's usually a big deer. But sometimes, sometimes in some ways it can, because some of them, some people are just bigger than other people.
Yeah.
and that's what this deer, and he got so dependent on just those cameras, and particularly those cell cams. He never went and hunted that deer. They found that deer dead in shed season. It was like 240 something inches. It was just a slammer.
That is a heartbreaker. Yeah, I kept on reminding myself this past year something that Mark Drury said to me earlier this year, which was like these cameras are great. The cell cameras can give you some very valuable information much quicker than usual, but there are certain times and places when you need to be the camera. And I kept telling myself that. And I kept on reminding myself that I've got to be the camera. Like, I can't be too dependent on these things. I've got to remember, like, you got to be the camera sometimes. And, one of the bucks I killed this year, it was exactly a situation like this where I've been debating, like, should I wait until I get a daylight picture of him showing back up? Like, he'd been gone for a month, and I kept on wanting to get confirmation he was back. And then I kept on debating back and forth. Should I just go for it when the conditions are right, or do I need to wait till I know for sure he's here? And that phrase just kept popping up in my mind, like, be the camera, be the camera. And, everything else lined up perfect, annual pattern, blah, 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 blah. I told myself I got to be the camera, and sure enough, I got a picture that night. And it's I think something, it was a good lesson learned for sure.
Couple of my probably favorite podcasts ever was a couple of different times that you had Mark Drury on.
Yeah, he's great.
Man, he's so methodical, and he's so he can explain. He has a way of explaining things that just make a lot of sense. I remember years ago him saying that. When I started to get into doing food plots and stuff like that, because I love doing all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember years ago he said, you plant a food plot per the tree, per the access.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I've used that quite a bit over the years. I haven't shot a lot of deer on food plots, but I've set up a lot of places that way. And it does, and it works. And you can, I don't know. The guy's just super methodical about a lot of the things that his approaches.
Yeah.
And people there's people out there that give him, grief and stuff like that, and say, oh, they got these, manicured farms and stuff like that. But to me, I think Mark Drury's a smart guy. I think again, it was a methodical plan, and the methodical plan was he's a smart businessman. He put himself in position because he knew that he wanted to make enough money to buy his own ground, to be able to hunt the caliber of deer that he truly wants to go after. So if there's something wrong in working hard and putting yourself in the right place, then if there's something wrong in that, then I guess I'm probably going to be wrong a lot, because
yeah, you can't,
because he
can't fault him for that hard work.
No, because that whole what they've done with Drury Outdoors in general. That took a lot of hard work. It had to. I can only imagine.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, speaking of outdoor media, I did wonder, did you end up capturing the end of this hunt on film? Were you able to self-film that somehow? Or if not, or I guess either way, are we going to get to see an episode of this someday?
Yeah, so I have everything except for the kill shot. I have my miss, I have my full draw, I have other encounters, but I didn't. That morning, I had no way to film it.
Yeah.
Because all I had was my my video camera on my with my camera arm. So, and honestly, it was kind of, I filmed the recovery and all that kind of stuff and everything afterwards, but I got lucky.
Yeah, you got to take it when it comes your way.
That was luck. That like I said, that was the first time I had ever shot a deer off the ground, first time I'd ever stalked one. But boy, I could see where that could be addicting. Like I could see why guys get addicted to like stalking mule deer and stuff like that, because that was, it kind of got me thinking like, man, I need to get out west and go on a, spot and stalk mule deer hunt. I think that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be careful. There'll be new addictions awaiting you real quick.
I know.
Where,
I went on an elk hunt last year, or was it last year? Yeah, last year. And I got one coming up in Wyoming this year. So, yeah, I could see myself getting pretty addicted to that.
Yeah, that stuff's pretty awesome. Well, where Justin, where should folks head to see that episode whenever it's available and all the rest of the content you guys have got coming out?
So, all of our Whitetail Addictions episodes are on our Lone Wolf Custom Gear YouTube channel. You can go there. You go to our website, any Instagram or Facebook. You can find all that there. Or the only thing that I really do on social media anymore is just the Instagram stuff at Mason's Dad 1975. But yeah.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate, we went longer than I expected, so sorry for keeping you so late tonight, but there's some good stuff we got into there, and when you get us talking about this kind of stuff, it's hard to shut up sometimes. So thank you, Justin, for sharing this.
I kind of felt bad because we went so long, but it's kind of it's to tell the entirety of it, and it's a kind of long, drawn out process and all the ups and downs that came along with it.
Oh yeah. Well, as far as I'm concerned, those are the best kinds of hunts. The long, drawn out, years long sagas like this, full of ups and downs and tough moments in between, and that one final highest to highs. So this is great, and awesome buck, awesome story. Thank you for sharing it, and congratulations. What a heck of a deer and accomplishment.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
Let's do another one of these in a year or two when you get the next big one down, all right?
I'll try.
All right, Justin. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. And that is it. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder, I know the season's done for many of you, but we are still pumping out lots of whitetail content over on themeateater.com. So check out the website for our latest written articles. Make sure to be following along with Tony's Foundations series. Every Tuesday, he's got those new shorter episodes here on the Wired to Hunt podcast feed. He's got some great topics in mind for the coming weeks and months here in the off season. So definitely don't miss those. Head on over to the Meat Eater YouTube channel if you want to scratch that hunting and fishing itch here in the winter. There's all sorts of new fishing shows, hunting shows. There's going to be some new stuff from our buddies over on The Element coming out on the Meat Eater channel here in the coming months with some of their whitetail hunts from this past year. 1 week in November, the show that I was filming this past November, that'll come out later this year over there as well. So stay tuned for all that. And I think that's it. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you being here with me. I'm excited to be kicking off this new year with you, sharing my experiences and those of all the great guests that we have here on the show along with you. It's going to be a good year. Let's keep it moving. Thanks for being here. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.